All right, guys, welcome to the channel. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're gonna be giving you your top 10 tips for relocating to Lake of the Ozarks. So top 10 tips, say that 5 times fast. But we're gonna break it up. We're gonna do 5 today and we're gonna do 5 next week. So we're gonna split it up a little bit because if I know these videos go too long, I'm gonna lose your interest and you're gonna click and you're gonna move on to other things. So we're gonna break it up a little bit. I'm gonna give you 5 today, 5 next week, but these are all tips, tricks, cons, pros, things to think about like as you're deciding on potentially relocating, investing, retiring, whatever that looks like. I don't know, we just wanna give you some things to think about. Clearly we're doing that with intention. So if you want, call me, reach out. I would love to answer more questions. I'd love to set you up on a home search. Of course, we would love to help you. And the team is ready to help you as much as we possibly can. Until then, these videos are gonna give you some insight or some things to think about, right? Give you some tips for relocating to the lake. And the first tip, which is probably the most common and probably don't need to even say it, but you gotta do your research thoroughly, okay? So I throw in the thoroughly because you gotta do your research no matter what. And of course you gotta research. Whether you're moving here or anywhere, you gotta research the place that you're gonna go. So you're gonna Google things, right? And you're gonna watch YouTube videos. And if you need more videos, go back into my channel, right? Go into the channel, click around, look around, watch videos, it'll be helpful. And then obviously reach out and get more information as time goes on, but you gotta do your research the best you can from a distance, right? So Googling information, YouTubing information, trying to get plugged into the local scene. You gotta try to gather as much info as you possibly can to make the best decision you possibly can. And whether it's here or anywhere, right? We would never want anyone to make a purchase and then later regret that purchase because they didn't know X. They didn't know that was there or this was there or this was the scenario, right? We wouldn't want that to happen. So we try to feed as much information, good and bad, right? So you don't find yourself in that position. So you gotta do your research, you gotta do it thoroughly, you gotta do it with people that you trust. Obviously, we would love to help you do that. When you're here and you're doing your research, tip number 2 is you gotta choose the right side of the lake. Gotta choose the right side. There's the east side, the west side, okay? You got the St. Louis side, the Kansas City side. I'm telling you, when you're researching from a distance and you got Google Earth pulled up or you got Google Maps or whatever and you're looking at the lake and you're like, oh, we live there and oh, the hospital's over there or all the grocery stores over there. It doesn't look like it's that far or it doesn't look that tricky to get to it, but I promise you, depending on where you purchase the home in correlation to the things that you need, you could make a bad purchase and regret that purchase based off of how long it takes you to go from your property to the grocery store or to the hospital or to the doctors or to the school or something. We gotta make sure we get that right. Like we 1000% have to make sure we get that right. I talk about it all the time. I'm on mile marker 42. We are away from things. So when we come down and we're here, we're hanging out, again, we bounce back and forth between Colorado and Missouri, you know that. But when we're here, I bring as much supplies as I possibly can so I can stay as long as I possibly can before I have to go to a grocery store. Like I just takes a while, right? To get out of the lake, to get out to the main road, to wind your way into a grocery store and back. Like the commute from a distance, looking at it online, doesn't look like much, but when you're here, I promise you, it is going to take time. These roads are curvy, they're steep. You gotta make your way out of the lake just to get out to the main roads. If you're on the wrong side of the lake, there are only so many bridges that cross the lake. So it looks simplistic from a distance, from a Google Earth or a Google Maps, but if you're on the west side of the lake, and you need to get to the east side for the convenience of amenities, you're gonna wanna rethink that process. Or you're gonna just wanna be comfortable with it, that it might take 30, 45, maybe an hour to get from your property to wherever it is that you're trying to go. So you gotta do your research, tip number 1. Tip number 2 is you gotta choose the right side of the lake. Tip number 3 and obviously doing your research and picking the right side of the lake. Tip number 3 is you gotta make a trip and you have to come visit. Come, make a trip down here, spend time, spend 4 or 5 days, spend a week, make multiple trips if you have to, because the only way you're gonna get a feel for what this place is by being here, right? And if you don't spend time here, again, you might have a rude awakening when you get here that these roads are steep and they're hilly and they're curvy and it takes a while to get from place to place. And you gotta have the understanding that depending on the lifestyle that you live right now, we talk to a lot of people that are in urban cities or that are in the suburbs of big cities, and you gotta go to Walgreens, you gotta hit CVS, you need the grocery store, you're there in 5 minutes, right? Here it's different, but it's also a different pace of life, right? You gotta understand what side of the lake to live on, you gotta understand what it's like to commute around this lake, but you also gotta understand you can probably slow down a little bit too. Take your time, slow down, no big deal, not a big rush. You don't have to have the ease and convenience of everything right this second, right? And so you gotta do some research, you gotta pick the right side of the lake. You gotta make a trip down here and visit so we can show you around, drive you to different parts of the lake, show you what it's like to live on the west side and then drive to the east side, see how that feels. Rent a car, drive around yourself, spend time making your way around this lake. So when you're making the decision and you're up towards Osage or Village of Four Seasons, or maybe you're going down towards Camdenton, maybe you're picking a property that's down towards the 42 like me, cool. Great, as long as you understand what it's like to get around, right? The best way to do that is obviously to come down here and make a trip. So you've done your research, you know what part of the lake you want to live on, you've made a number of trips, you've made your purchase, and now that you're here, just one other tip to think about and understand and realize, right? This is a summertime destination. It's a tourism destination. So with tourism comes a lot of traffic and influx of outsiders. So tip number 4 is just be prepared. Understand that during those peak seasons, right? Those peak season months, Memorial Day to Labor Day, you're gonna have this influx of humans coming into your area. And with that influx, they're gonna clog up the roadways or the restaurants or the bars. And hey, that's okay, because that's what brings in, right, financial stability to this area and a lot of jobs and a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of pros to it, right? But from a local perspective, just understand that you're gonna have this influx of people coming in. And so if you need to go to the grocery store or do something, maybe you try to do it during the week, right? Go Monday through Thursday and understand that from like Friday to Sunday, you're gonna have more people, right? It's going to be busier and slower out on the roadways, and the grocery stores are going to be busy. And so sometimes that can have a feel, right? The outside presence and the tourism traffic and some of the obnoxiousness that can come from it can have a feel from time to time. But it's typically a weekend kind of thing. It's typically an event kind of thing that's happening around the lake. Holiday weekends especially. And if you live here locally, maybe you just plan around it, right? So the tip of it is understand that it's inevitable, but understand like, hey, there's probably ways to navigate it. It will be more relevant depending on which side of the lake you are and how close you are to certain things. So back to doing your research and making a trip and a visit and understanding which side of the lake you are on, depending on where you put that house or home or condo, right, will depend on how much of that tourism traffic that you're gonna get. And so the last tip to think about after the research and the trips and everything else is understanding the real estate market, the seasonal time frame that comes with the market. There's a lot to navigate with it. I won't go down a long rabbit hole when it comes with it. This is where the plug of like, call me and talk to me and get connected to my team and let us help you, right? But you have to understand what the real estate market does here. There's an influx of properties because it's seasonal, right? What is the best time to purchase? When is the influx of homes coming on the market? How do I negotiate the things that I need? Hey, this has a a boat dock, but it doesn't have a boat lift. How do we negotiate that? There's a lot of things that can come with the real estate market, finding the best home, obviously making the best offer you can on that property, but understanding influx of seasons and peak seasons, off seasons. How do we sell? Are they fully furnished? There's a lot that kind of goes into it, and that's where your research and connection come into play. You have to do a lot of like outside research. You gotta Google, you gotta get on the web, you gotta watch YouTube videos, right? You gotta, once you figure that out, choosing the right side of the lake is very important. You have to come down and you have to make a visit and let us drive you around and explore different parts. And do you want big waters and coves and all those kinds of things? And no matter where you pick, right, you have to understand that there's a tourism element. So you're gonna have an influx of people in tourism during peak season. So depending on where you live, that might be a factor, it might not be, but it will be a factor no matter where. It just depends on how much of a factor. But once you're doing all of that stuff, understanding the real estate market, how to make negotiations, what's the best timing for you and your family for you to get the best deal that you're looking for on the property that you're looking for. So those are my top 5 tips for relocating. Next week, I'm gonna talk about 5 more. Again, these are just to be helpful, feed you content, obviously with intention. We would love to help answer more of your questions. So doesn't matter, right? Whatever the question is, if you need help on anything down at Lake of the Ozarks, call me, text me, email me. I'd love to do a Zoom call with you, answer all your questions. Of course, get you plugged into as much information as we can. Home search setup, if you're coming into town, we'd love to drive you around and show you around as well. So whatever we can do to help you out, let me know. And until then, we'll see you on the next video.